Hello and welcome to The Bottom Line on TVP World. This is where we unpack some of the main business and economic stories of the day. I'm your host, Marie Cato. 150 billion euros for arms procurement. That's the elevator pitch for safe or security action for Europe, a new fund where member states will be able to borrow money for weapons. On Wednesday, the Council of the European Union backed the initiative so it can officially go ahead. Our own Jan Kendi has more.
With the threat of war looming from the east and no guarantee of US support, European countries are working to shore up their defence. That's why the European Commission on Tuesday greenlit an arms procurement loan programme known as SAFE, which the Polish Minister for the EU, Adam Szłapka, said will offer a range of benefits.
For the first time, Europe is taking serious responsibility for this issue. This is the first major program aimed at supporting the development of the defense industry. Not only will it make Europe safer, with more capacity to manufacture equipment and ammunition, but it's also a tremendous opportunity for our economic development.
Worth 150 billion euros, SAFE will support joint purchases of military equipment across all 27 EU member states. One condition: 65% of the funds must be spent within the EU or in selected allied countries such as Ukraine and Switzerland. But most importantly, the loan will be offered at a favourable 3.3% interest and backed by the EU. This gives an advantage to countries like Poland, which typically borrow at higher rates, around 5.5%. According to Warsaw's defence minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, Poland could receive up to 1/5 of the entire fund.
We are counting on some 30 billion euros. And that would be a great boost if we could use those funds. And if we could include this in contracts, those that have already been agreed to, that is an incredibly important initiative. This is extremely important for us.
1/3 of the funds may be used for equipment made outside of the EU, an important concession to Warsaw, which buys a lot of hardware from the US, and recently also from South Korea. In 2024, Poland was the biggest defence spender in NATO relative to GDP, but experts stress the importance of ensuring that a chunk of the spending stays within the Polish economy.
The worst we could do, we could just spend this 2 trillion zlotys, acquiring equipment from outside, but this would have zero positive impact on Polish economy. So, referring to Prime Minister Tusk's statements from last year, we need to make sure, at least I would say, 50% of this amount will be spent with the Polish companies or the companies that will or are operating in Poland and producing in Poland.
The government could use the SAFE money to buy a range of Polish-made equipment, including Krab howitzers, Baobab mine-laying vehicles, Rosomak armoured personnel carriers, and components of the Narew and Wisła air defence systems. Before countries start drawing up money from SAFE, they have 6 months to come up with national plans outlining what they want to spend it on. The final tranches from the programme will be disbursed in 2030.
We could argue that developing defence and investing in security is Europe's top priority, and the support for SAFE certainly affirms that. The Russian aggression upon Ukraine highlighted that the EU has to be able to defend itself, and now, more recently, potentially independently of the US. Now let's welcome Ignacy Morawski, chief economist from the Polish daily Puls Biznesu. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us. So to begin with, let's take a moment to fully appreciate the significance of SAFE in EU policy. Now, this is only the second time in the history of the EU where the EU issues a common debt, the first being the Pandemic Recovery Fund, something that would be unimaginable just 10 years ago at the end of the sovereign debt crisis in Europe. How do you perceive this?
Well, I perceive this as a very small step forward. It is not as great program as marketed by European Union. It is an important step, right? So European Union is moving towards common financing instruments. However, we should remember that these are loans. It's not budget financing, right? These are not grants. So they are slightly more attractive than market rates. However, we have to remember, because in the video material before, the rate of the EU loan was compared to the market rate in the Polish currency. We have to remember that very often in defense contracts, especially with foreign entities, different rates and loan costs are used, very often lower than market rates. So the benefits from the SAFE program for Poland are on the table. The net effect will be positive, but this is not a game changer, neither for Poland nor for European defense industry.
I just wanted to now highlight the welcome developments in SAFE, which Warsaw actually lobbied for. First, the equipment from outside of the EU can be financed with that money, which is obviously very important for Poland due to the long-standing ties with the US industry. Second, cash can be used for ongoing projects. This is very important given that military contracts tend to last for years, decades even. What are your comments in regards to that dimension of SAFE?
Well, to me, it is obvious that European Union wants to support common projects and European industry. So most of the funds have to be spent inside the EU, and this is fine. This is understandable. At the same time, it is positive that we can spend some of the money on projects and procurement from companies from outside Europe. It is obvious that Poland is dependent on US supplies and on supplies from Korea. So I think it's positive that our requirement was taken into account.
Can we say that SAFE is a good deal for countries like Poland? And if so, why? On the other hand, I sense a little bit of skepticism on your part as well.
Yes, I am a bit skeptical. Well, as I said, this is positive. Right? This is positive that European Union has made one step forward and has introduced instrument that will support defense spending. However, the amount of money mobilized is quite low on the European level, and it is not a pure budget instrument. This is loan, right? It's only a loan. So it's like a subsidized credit. So it's positive, but it's very important to understand that this is not a game changer. It's not a game changer for European industry. It's not a game changer for rearmament programs. It's not a game changer for defense plans in Central Europe and the whole European Union. This is like, you have a strategic challenges. You make a small step towards them, but it's a small step. Most of the burden will be still on the back of each member state.
I want to now move on to what SAFE provides versus what the EU's needs actually are. Deloitte recently published a report saying that Poland will spend around 500 billion euros on defense in the coming years. SAFE is much smaller than that. We're talking about one country only. So Poland needs 500 billion euros. Like you say, it's a step in the right direction, but it's clearly not ambitious enough to actually make a difference. So maybe you could elaborate more on that. This probably falls in line with what you think.
150 billion euro is less than 1% of the EU GDP. And it is spread for 4 years. So you can make a very simple calculation that the annual the amount directed to that program is around 0.2, 0.3% of GDP, right? So, and now we can compare that to the target level of spending for defense aims, which is around 4 to 5% of GDP. I don't really believe that Western countries will spend 4 or 5% of GDP, but in general, this is the theoretical level that should be aimed for. And clearly, countries in the Central Europe would like to spend 4 or 5% of GDP on defense. So we have a European instrument which is 0.2% in annual terms. So it is still more than zero, which is positive, but it is very low compared to financing requirements. And again, let me repeat that this is a loan. It's not a budget financing.
So dare I say that you feel that this is more of a symbolic gesture from the EU?
Yes, this is a symbolic gesture. Last month, Poland, together with the prestigious Brussels think tank Bruegel, proposed an introduction of European defense mechanism, which would act differently as a joint budgetary program with higher spending, with much more power. But this is clearly rejected at the European level. So now we have symbolic programs like SAFE.
So what went wrong with that proposal?
If I can share some more general observation. To me, it doesn't seem like the EU can play an important role in defense program in Europe. Probably EU member states will look to build so-called coalitions of the willing, so group of countries that will cooperate, that will form common programs, that will coordinate, make common training, and other, build common defense capabilities maybe. But I don't think that the European Union as an organization will play an important role in defense programs and in defense activities in general.
So do you think that first they have to realize that SAFE is essentially a symbolic gesture, realize that SAFE isn't really the mechanism to go ahead with, and then member states will create pockets of teams, shall we say, and then figure something out independently?
Yes, I think so. I wouldn't like to diminish totally the role of the European Union, because especially from the industry perspective, it is important to build common projects, common standards, common procurement. So that there are many goals that can be achieved on the European level. They were mentioned in the famous report by Mario Draghi, which indicated many improvements that can be made in the organization of European economy to make arms production and procurement more efficient. So, the EU can play some role on the industry policy level. But in terms of large targets, ambitious targets, defense policy, defense programs, defense capabilities, I don't think that the EU will play a major role. Countries will build the smaller coalitions of the willing.
So let's allow ourselves a flight of fancy. If you were to create a European defense instrument that would make a real difference in financing, what would it be and how would it work?
Well, the big question first is to ask whether the European Union is the right organization to do it. It was not set up to build defense programs. We have NATO, which is a defense organization. And the European Union is mainly an economic organization, right? I would say that a mechanism for organizing common market. So I'm not sure whether the European Union is the right instrument, but should we assume that it is? Probably the most effective way to finance a very fast and ambitious rearmament program would be to introduce a new budget, a new common budget, financed by bond issuance by the European Union, backed by all member states, and working as a budget, right? So giving money to those who need it, not lending money, but giving money, like on the state level. The government does not loan money or lend money to its citizens. It provides transfers or subsidies, and rarely credits. So if the European Union wanted to sort of introduce some game changer, it would be a new budget for defense purposes.
Now I just want to move on to the Polish angle as we move on. The Polish government wants to grab around 30 out of the 150 billion euros available in the fund. And out of that, it hopes to fund some of the homegrown initiatives with them, including the Crab howitzers, the Baobab mine-laying vehicles, the Rosomak and the Borsuk armored personnel carriers, and even components of the Narew and Wisła air defense systems. Now, the question is SAFE a boon for the Polish defense industry, or does it still reel from years of underinvestment and it won't actually be able to really absorb those funds?
Well, if we get 30 billion euros, as Deputy Prime Minister Kosiniak-Kamysz said, that would be a substantial amount of money, I would say, because it would be like 130 billion zloty, which is slightly less than 3% of GDP. So it would equal to 2 years of capital spending. So if we get that, that would be, from the Poland's point of view, quite substantial amount of money. Obviously, the question is whether this is a new money or something that in other scenario we would have we would have borrowed from other institutions, right? There are export banks in many countries which provide armaments, and those export banks provide quite cheap loans to countries which procure armaments. So we would get those funds anyway. So I wouldn't treat those 30 billion euros as money that sort of, falls from the sky. It's not working like this. But still, it's a large amount of money, which we probably can borrow at slightly lower rates than on the market. So it can be a substantial support for the Polish industry. But if we think about the production potential in Poland, right, whether it's at the right level, whether it's growing at the right rate, I think that the main challenge here is mainly organizational. It's not related to financing, because financing is there, whether it's provided by Polish government or foreign institutions, it will be there. So money is not a real constraint today for the defense industry. We have challenges related to investments, to building capacity. Now we live in a world when everyone wants to increase spending on arms. So it's not easy to buy, for example, machines for production or technologies. Delivery times are quite long. So you cannot build a completely new factory within a year. It's impossible. So it takes time. It takes many years. The important thing here is to maintain as fast rate of growth as possible. But we cannot count on some huge increases in production over the short horizon.
Sure. And as we just move on and wrap up, next month The Hague hosts the NATO summit, and all the members are supposed to, they're expected to increase their defence expenditure to 5% of GDP. Now, the question is this sustainable, spending 5% of GDP year after year?
No, but it depends. It depends on which country we are talking about. If we talk about Poland and Central Europe, it is sustainable. It's actually one of the most important goals of each government here. So I would say it's a necessity. It's a necessity. Other elements of the economic system or the budget system will have to adjust. So it's like a pillar which you cannot move or touch. However, when we talk about Western European countries, I really do not believe that they can raise the defense spending to 5% of GDP. To be honest, I don't believe they can raise it to 3% of GDP. They will struggle to increase it to 2%, the previous target. From the political point of view, it's very difficult. The budgets are stretched. The fiscal deficits in countries other than Germany are high. So actually, I doubt that Western Europe will hit the target. What I'm counting on is that Central Europe and Scandinavia, so Northern Europe, can together form a large bloc, economically strong, to provide substantial boost to defense spending. And this group of countries can spend up to 5% of GDP and build a resistant and strong wall which would protect Europe from possible Russian aggression.
Okay, so you're not holding your breath too much for June.
Well, I would say that probably the promises will be high. but the question is whether they will be met. I'm quite skeptical. But still, I still believe that what will be provided here in Central and Northern Europe will be a huge boost to defense capabilities of the whole European Union.
Okay, Ignacy Morawski, Chief Economist from Polish Business Daily, Puls Biznesu. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Great, thanks.
And that concludes The Bottom Line today. I was your host, Marie Cato. We bring you the best of regional business Monday to Friday at 5:10 CET on TVP World. And in the meantime, for the latest in regional business, follow us on X and on tvpworld.com. And for more news and analysis, stay with us on TVP World. Goodbye.